I wanted to make a video about the videos I am making. I've been busily trying to make these videos as perfect as possible, delaying my release of my Tyndall Mark to get the AI to pronounce the words correctly and put the emphasis in the right places. I still didn't succeed, as you can hear even in this video. Tyndall Mark, too funny. Chapter 1 went live today, so I logged on to check it out. And of course, I hear all kinds of things I wish now I had noticed and fixed. I had worked so hard, and yet, the moment I heard it, all I could notice were the flaws. Things I should have caught. Things I should have fixed. I have tried to use AI as a way to achieve a kind of technical perfection, and in some ways, I've pulled it off. When I record live on my iPhone, there's the noise floor from my setup, breath sounds, the way my voice changes as I run out of air. And you hear all that. AI doesn't have any of that. It doesn't breathe, it doesn't tire, and it never picks up room noise or mic hum. I've spent an absurd amount of time hacking the spelling, spacing words, tweaking phonetics, doing whatever it takes to get the AI to say things the way I would. But is it latchet or latchet? I don't actually know, and I could probably look it up, but that would require me to stop what I'm doing and go down a rabbit hole. And we both know how that ends. I do know that forsook is a crazy way to pronounce forsook. Even when I get the AI's pronunciation technically correct, I realize how much of translation is interpretation. There's no such thing as a purely neutral translation. This channel is an experiment. So please understand that I'm not here to push a particular translation or its doctrine. I'm here to present Scripture and wrestle with the challenges of translation, tradition, and understanding, using AI as a tool, not a substitute for thinking. And I want to be transparent about how I got here, about my background, my journey, and the interpretative philosophy that shaped me. Christianity has a unique relationship with translation. Unlike the other Abrahamic religions, which hold that their texts can only truly be understood in the holy language, Christianity has historically embraced the idea that Scripture should be available in the language of the people. Many of its earliest converts were more familiar with the Greek Septuagint, LXX, than the Hebrew Old Testament. Before the Protestant Reformation, the Latin Vulgate was considered the authoritative Bible of the Western Church. And yet, even the Vulgate was once a vernacular translation, vulgar meaning common language, which later became sacred in its own right, much as some denominations hold the King James Version today. The Protestant Reformation radically expanded this principle, arguing that Scripture was meant to be understood, not locked behind an elite language. William Tyndale, in particular, fought for an English Bible that even a plowboy could understand. For that, he was executed, and yet his translation shaped nearly all English Bibles that followed, including the KJV, which borrowed heavily from his work. I like the King James Version, not because I think it's the only or even the best translation, but because it's the most influential. Its idioms and expressions have seeped into everyday speech, much like the Anglican Book of Common Prayer. I'm not Anglican, but who isn't familiar with Dearly Beloved, we are gathered here today? It's part of the cultural fabric, just like Shakespeare and Alexander Pope. But here's the irony. The very translations that once made Scripture accessible have, over time, become untouchable relics to certain traditions. The same logic that once demanded a Bible in the common tongue now insists that a centuries-old translation is the only valid one. But language changes, and with it, so does the way we translate Scripture. That's why translation is never a one-and-done process. It's a balance between past and present, between text and meaning. This is also why I chose to begin my presentation of the New Testament with Mark rather than Matthew. Most scholars agree, and I have been convinced by their arguments, that Mark was written first. Since the Gospels are traditionally arranged in the order they were written, it makes sense for Mark to be the first in my presentation. But of course, you can listen in whatever order you prefer. I hope you enjoy the Tyndall New Testament as read by my AI persona. May the Lord bless your interaction and contemplation of His Word.